everyone. I'm Todd Keats, founder, CEO of My Care Friends.
And I'm Katie Seymour, VP of Programming and Community.
My Care Friends is proud to launch Global Caregiving Youth Collective, a new series shining a global light on young carers, voices too often unheard. The series features individuals who began caregiving in childhood and continue supporting loved ones today. Their lived experience and honesty shape every conversation.
Millions of young people provide meaningful care for family members, yet many remain unseen and unsupported. Through compassion and connection, My Care Friends hopes to build understanding and help create a future where young carers are truly seen and valued.
Follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook and watch each episode on the My Care Friends Network on YouTube. And now, Jacqueline, Omar, and Aditya, over to you.
Thanks, Todd and Katie. We're excited to bring this very important and special My Care Friends educational program to viewers wherever you may be around the world. Caregiving is a responsibility that presents us with many challenges, and even more so for people who are or have been young carers like us. We hope you'll join us for each episode, whether you are a young carer or you care for someone who's a young carer. Today's episode is Growing Up Fast, Life as a Young Carer or Caregiving Youth. So welcome to our very first episode. I'm so excited to be joined by Omar and Aditya.
Hello, everyone. My name is Omar. I'm joining here today is because the things that we're talking about is very important, and I really care because at a young age, I became a caregiver for my uncle and Nana, and right now, I'm studying film and television at New York University. But my past life, I was a young caregiver, and things that we're talking about, I just really do care about it.
Hello, everyone. I'm Aditya, and I just think it's really important. I'm really happy to be part of this, just contributing to this. I think we all are really proud of ourselves because now we're just going to be shedding light on something that is often swept under the carpet, and that is the experience of caregiving youth. I myself am a young caregiver. I'm 18 years old, and I'm just really excited to sort of share our experiences, perhaps give some advice, learn a little bit more about this. This is a learning process for not just the viewers, but for us as well. So let's get started with this.
Thank you, Omar and Aditya. I'm Jacqueline and I'm 21. I'm joining from Melbourne, Australia, and I've also grown up as a young carer. There is a difference in terminology. I use the term young carer because that's what we use here in Australia. And I sort of stepped into a caring role from a really young age. I began caring for my twin brother and my older brother pretty much for as long as I can remember. Especially having a twin, I feel like I was sort of a built-in carer because we did everything at the same stage. We were at the same primary school for quite a few years. So they have disabilities, including mental and physical health conditions. And then in 2016, when I was in year 6, my last year of primary school, I began caring for my mum when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And that was also a time where I took on a bigger caring role for both of my brothers, as my mum was less able to care for them while she was undergoing her treatment. What are your young carer stories that brought you here today?
Hello, everyone. I'm Omarion, and I'm joining from the United States. My caregiving responsibility started when I was 10 years old. I had small hands, really didn't know what to do with them. And I feel like at a young age, when you have small hands taking care of your loved ones, like my nana and my uncle, you just really enter this state of just mental depression. But as a young age, I did things that no child should have to do. I cooked meals. I bathed my nana and my uncle. I fed them. Um, I taught my uncle how to get up out of bed and try to help him regain his sense of hope that he will walk again. And now my caregiving daily duties did end when my uncle passed away on my senior year of high school. But now I'm attending New York University right now as a senior, and I'm just really excited to talk about the important issues today.
So I'm based in the UK. I'm in London right now, and I'm going to be starting at university very soon. And my story is I found out that I was a caregiver quite early on. My brother was diagnosed with autism when he was about 2 years old. At the time, I was around 7 or 8, and it immediately thrust me into this position of no longer being just a brother, but suddenly almost like a third parent for my younger brother, in the sense that because he's nonverbal and he's got ADHD, he doesn't have any safety awareness and he's completely dependent for sort of hygiene, eating, getting dressed in the morning, basically everything. And so suddenly I found myself looking after him 24/7, making sure that he's safe and just helping him communicate. And I think this is just as a side note, it's really awesome that we all have completely different stories. But I think that's kind of what unites us in a way that we all have completely different experiences, but we're all united by the fact that they were all caregivers.
Definitely. And I think that's a common thread is that we had experiences that were normalized for us when we were young that weren't normal for our peers. I remember like visiting my friends' houses in primary school and thinking it was so different to mine, and that I felt sort of nervous having friends over to my house because my house looked so different to theirs, because I had brothers with disabilities, and because we had carers and support workers in my home, and my friends didn't have anything in like that in their home. And those responsibilities that we took on, like Omar shared his responsibilities caring. Mine was sort of in the form of like emotional regulation for my brothers, or supporting my mum with a lot of chores like shopping, or administering medication to my brothers and dealing with medical crises that they were experiencing. And I think it really does normalize responsibilities from a very early age, but it's often hidden labor that we don't see. Was that your experience, Omar?
Yes, at a young age, like Aditya said, we didn't really know what being a young caregiver was. So doing all these responsibilities, it did take me aback because I was shocked. I didn't know that at a young age a child was supposed to inject insulin into his uncle's arm. I didn't know that a child was supposed to, place a rubber band strap around his arm and just do that, seeing needles and seeing all these medications and things like that that you don't take but are for your loved ones is kind of traumatic in a way. And not only that, seeing your loved ones also naked and in a vulnerable state, it does something to a child's mind. So talking about that is just a scary thing, I would say, because now thinking about it, there are other young caregivers out there, doing the same thing and seeing what's going on out here in the world, which is just crazy. What about you, Aditya?
I find it interesting. You talk about sort of doing things that you realized very later on that you shouldn't have had to do at a young age. I think that's something we can all uh, relate to. And something that I will be touching upon a little later, and it's something I really experienced, was kind of losing out on. It's like suddenly all my childhood years just vanished like that. And before I was even a brother, I became a pseudo parent. And I think just going into that, not realizing that I had just suddenly started maturing, I had suddenly become, my mind was being filled with all of these sort of anxieties about looking after my brother, not now, but in the future. And so I think the mental impact that it had on myself, my family, and just also the impact on my day-to-day activities, I didn't realize that that was sort of not normal until very later on in my life. And yeah, I think that's something that we will be exploring a little bit later. And it's definitely very interesting, but it's sort of that delayed realization that I think a lot of people right now who don't actually know that they're caregivers are experiencing.
Absolutely. And that was definitely my experience because I hadn't come across the term young carer until I was 15 and I was connected with a young carer service. So I think terminology is a really important part of recognition and identifying young carers. Omar, would you be able to tell us a bit more about the difference in terminology across countries? We touched on it a bit before. Here in Australia, we use the term young carers, but I know in America, the term caregiving youth is more popular. What is the difference with those terminologies and how are they used around the world?
Yes, I'm glad you stated that topic, Jacqueline. I know that in the United States, we usually use the term caregiving youth, but I know that in the UK and Australia, it's more of, I guess you guys would say young carer. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like different worlds, but same reality. And they might sound small, but it really doesn't matter because the language a country uses it shows how much that country recognizes, young people like us. And if there even is a name, for what we're doing and going through, it's kind of hard to support it when we really don't know what to call ourselves in terms like young carer or caregiving youth. So I feel like the society and government, they have problems with that. I would also like to say, when you look at different countries and you see big different things. I know in the UK there's more like formal recognition for young carers. Some schools and health systems actually identify students and they offer support. And I feel like it's the same for Australia as well because I feel like their awareness is growing more and there are more programs even though it's not perfect, but it's still in place there for the system. But in the United States, for us and other young carers, I just feel like it's not implemented well here. Most caregiving youth are completely invisible. I mean, there are a few systems that identify us, but in my opinion, most schools they don't ask, doctors they don't ask, and I just feel like the communities doesn't ask as well.
Yeah, well, I will admit I've been called out a bit here because I do use the word caregiver interchangeably. I think that's probably because I've been a bit Americanized. Um, but yeah, we do use the word carer, young carer over here, and quite different to what it is like in the US. I would say that we have a slightly more advanced system when it comes to recognition because I think I'm one of the very few, and definitely one of the very few fortunate people who was sort of recognized as a young carer very early on. I think almost as soon as my brother received the diagnosis, within I think even in that same year or even the year afterwards, I was a registered young carer, and then I started having access to a lot of local sort of local support centers, local youth projects. Um, but whilst the recognition process is definitely a lot more advanced here, I think overall society as a whole just has a still has quite a lot to go when it comes to actually really supporting, really getting to the root causes, getting to the roots of a lot of the other impacts on young carers. And I think that's one thing that we're trying to do, of course, trying to solve one avenue, trying to go down one avenue. But yeah, I think I would say that the UK definitely has a slightly more advanced system when it comes to recognition.
Absolutely. I think in Australia, as Omar said, there is growing awareness, but recognition of the term young carer is still quite rare. I found that my schools didn't understand that term, so it was hard to sort of convey what my life was like at home and the way that I supported my family members. But regardless of the terminology or the recognition in our countries, we all have a shared experience of either being in university or for Aditya soon to be entering university, which is very exciting. But our caregiving roles and our lives as a young carer has shaped us long before that. And whether we received strong support or whether there was a lack of support, that really mattered for our experiences going through the education system. And I think it's important to highlight that if you're growing up as a young carer or if you grew up providing care for a loved one and you weren't identified as a caregiving youth or as a young carer in your country, that's not a personal failure. It's a systems gap. For me, I didn't find out till I was 15, like I said, and I'd been in a lot of SIBS programs, which is short for siblings, so siblings of someone with a disability. And while they provided respite from my role at home, it wasn't really a recognition of my caring role. It was more so a recognition of the impact of growing up with someone with a disability in your family. So that wasn't a personal failing on my front. As a child, it's hard to know all this terminology, and our parents can't be introduced to it unless they're made aware by the systems. Aditya, I'd like to hear from you about the emotional impact of growing up as a young carer and how that shaped your life.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I think what you said was completely correct about it being a systems failure. But, there's still a lot of optimism. But coming back to what I said kind of towards the beginning about growing up really quickly, I think that seems to be the common theme when we talk about the impact on youth carers and young carers, rather. And for me, my personal experience is one day I was 7, the next day I was 17. And I think I keep coming back to this, and I think this is a phrase that I'll be using a lot, and I'll be torturing all of you with for the next few weeks, months ahead, which is third adult. And I definitely did feel like a third adult because to have a 7-year-old, and I'm sure you can all relate, to have a 7-year-old looking after doing sort of with basic hygiene, feeding, and regular sort of safety awareness, it's not even the day-to-day activities that makes you feel like you're older. It's the state of mind. It's the change in the mindset that you feel. You mentally mature because now you're in a position of it's no longer a position of like, can I play with my brother? Can I sort of pull his hair out? Can I steal his stuff? Can we have an argument and can I win? It's more of if I don't do anything right now, if I have to be here, I sort of kind of play this strategically. If I don't do this, something will happen to him. And I think you kind of go into this sort of protective mode. And what that did for me was the impact was as I grew older mentally, I started to feel kind of it became a little bit harder to socialize with the kids my age when I was growing up because my mind was somewhere else and at that point in time, it's very difficult to play with what was it, Hot Wheels. It's just quite difficult to do that. So I think yeah, definitely there was an element of isolation there. But I think I've definitely matured, and I think I've sort of learned to deal with it over time. But it's something I'm sure all of you can relate to. What about you, Emma?
Yes, I can most definitely relate, especially going to school, not really having, friends. And like you said, about not getting to, play with toys and not getting to, just even hang out with friends. I remember finding friends, it was hard for me because most of the time, I was bullied for what I wore, bullied because I looked different than everybody else, bullied because I feel like they knew something was going on at home and they bullied me for that for some reason. And
Yeah.
these are the things that, youth caregivers that they go through and it does something to your mental state. I'm getting bullied, but having to come back home to take care of my uncle, to change him, to give him, insulin and just all these things. I'm getting bullied, but having to come back home, seeing my uncle, having a seizure and having to call 911, having to have my small hands get him out of the bed and, place him on the ground, make sure he have his medical cords, make sure everything is in place. It's just a really scary system. And I'm kind of sad that it's set up like this way. What about you, Jacqueline?
Yeah, I definitely relate. I think it can be very confronting being a young carer and then going into a schooling environment and seeing how sort of normal and innocent the lives of your peers are. I definitely relate to what Aditya said about that sort of emotional maturity. I feel like in primary school, my friends were playing like mums or dads or families, where you sort of played house in the schoolyard. But for me, like the games that they were playing, that didn't look like how my family looked. And I think it was hard for me to engage in those sort of like imaginative or fantasy play games when the reality of my life at home was so stark. So I think even though my caring role gave me a lot of empathy for my brother's experience and my mum's experience as someone dealing with cancer diagnosis, it helped me in my work and also in my life at university to have empathy for other people's experiences. But it was a bit jarring, the contrast between like sort of life at home and my role as a young carer and trying to interact with my peers. I sort of felt like I was so much older than them or I couldn't relate to them, even though we were all actually the same age. And I think growing up fast was really something that I had to do to survive, but it did take sort of that childhood innocence and the joy that Aditya and Omar said with like playing with toys and fun, innocent things like that.
Yeah. And just as a slight digression, do you feel that, there are any, I guess, benefits, perhaps any sort of skills that you've learned as the things that you've gotten better at over time, just from that accelerated growth, that accelerated maturity in a way? Because for me, I definitely feel that, yes, there were significant costs. Caregiving did take some things away from me and it's taken things away from all of us. But just to find the silver lining, I think to an extent it's helped me become a lot more patient as an individual. Um, And I think it was also given me a lot more perspective when I talk to other people who have similar situations. It make me a lot more grateful for my position because sometimes I speak to people who they don't need to be carers, but their situation, their sort of lifestyle, I guess it really puts it into perspective because I get to appreciate the things that I have a brother, right? And that's something I always wanted, and I get to have that. So, do you have any positives? Are there any things that you've perhaps learned that you appreciate?
Absolutely. I think empathy is a big one, like I mentioned, but also resilience. I feel like my caring role taught me how to manage a lot of things and challenges at home, but also how to engage in life at school. And I was a part of choir and band and leadership opportunities. And it really forced me to prioritize things that were important to me so that I had a life and an identity outside of my caring role. But I think it also taught me to stand up for myself. And I know Omar touched on that bullying and the social isolation that comes from being a young carer. Because this is someone that you love and you care for me, it was really important to stand up for them and to advocate for their needs, which in turn taught me to advocate for mine and made sure that if my school or an extracurricular activity or something like that wasn't supportive of my caring role, that I learned to explain it to them and explain what my home life looked like and how I did need support on an ongoing basis.
Yes, I agree with you, Jacqueline. I feel like for me, I kind of use caring for others as my superpower. And not only that, like you said, standing up for yourself, even though I was bullied, I learned how to stand up for myself, especially in New York City where, things can get hectic out here. It's really crazy out here, but, I had to learn how to stand up for myself and, be that person. And in terms of using care as my superpower, I'm really involved in, filmmaking and storytelling. And well, hopefully one day where I am, I'm using, stories out there to create a change or, provoke something or provoke a conversation. And I use caring through storytelling because I love filmmaking, whether it's telling the story of this youth caregiver or this youth caregiver or even you guys' story to, just put something out there and let people know that, we are not alone.
Yeah. And I think just sort of coming back to the point on sort of being bullied and being ridiculed, just if I may, I think if we look at that, it's very easy to sort of find fault with them and say, oh, they're being inconsiderate, it's them, But I think if we zoom out, we've said multiple times this is a system failure, and it just comes from simply them not understanding what we've been through. And likewise, I won't understand what other people have gone through when with their specific. I mean, I probably won't even be able to relate to experiences of other carers, right? But I think it's an important thing because it reveals how there's still so much asymmetric information in this field. Um, so yeah, any kind of final thoughts about that?
Absolutely. I think with increased awareness about young carers, not only will we see it in young people being able to identify themselves as young carers, but also parents who are role modeling to their children that, families look different. And even though there might not be someone with a disability or care needs in your family, there might be in one of your friends from school or someone you know from your basketball team or something like that. And I think if parents had more awareness of young carers, then just like Aditya said, they would be able to role model that, this is normal for some people. It might not be our reality, but even though it's different, it's not something that's bad or deserves to be isolated for. And I think it's really important to note that whether your country has a name for young carers or caregiving youth or not, your experience is real and you deserve support. We all found out about our caring roles at different times in our lives without formal recognition, but we all deserve support from a young age, regardless of whether we received it.
That was great, Jacqueline. I think what I want to say is, I want to say that for me, growing up fast meant, learning responsibility way too early. I think we all became resilient, organized, independent, and those are strengths that we all carry today. But it also, it meant stress, it meant worry, and it meant pressure that, most kids never had to know even, I would say think about. And being responsible at a young age, it helped us survive, but it also took parts of our childhood away.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And there are the learnings from that, but also the costs that we've spoken about. So thank you
Yeah.
so much, Aditya and Omar, and thank you to the audience for listening. We're so excited to have met you in this first episode. and we're looking forward to talking more in our next episode, which will be the emotional and mental health of caregiving youth. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.